All right, you can begin.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, sir. We are going to be doing chapter 8, which is understanding complex organizations. The members of my group consist of Mona Lisa Box, Arwen Ramugan, and myself, Jada Thompson. Leadership in an organization is both essential and common in our everyday lives. Learning to work and lead successfully will give you the tools and skills necessary for everyday life situations. Leadership in organizations in recent years has been spread to all the hierarchical levels, not just at top management. The goal is that all members of a business contribute to decision-making and leadership roles that will affect everyone. Groups and organizations. It could be very simple for one to spot obvious differences between an organization and a group. However, it is still important to identify subtle differences, and this can be challenging. A way to remember and identify these differences is by answering who, what, when, where, why, and how. So first, who? Who makes up an organization, and who makes up a group of people? Organizations are made up of approximately 20 or more people. Some organizations have tens of thousands of employees in it. Groups are made up of approximately 3 or more people, so it's a relatively small thing. What? What is an organization? An organization is a group of 2 or more individuals and the coordinated allocation of resources around a common goal or objective, said Gordon in 2022. What is a group? A group is a collection of 2 or more people who come together and work together to achieve common objectives. These groups consist of individuals who interact and depend on one another and share a common attitude toward at least one goal, said Mahesh in 2023. So the basic idea is that an organization is made up of groups, and a group is made up of individuals. When do organizations and groups interact? To put it simply, organizations and groups interact continuously. The success of any organization depends solely on the various groups that work within it, staying connected to work effectively and efficiently. If the various groups were to become isolated from one another, that is, like one group in an organization goes off to do their own thing without consulting the other members of other groups, then this would not only have a negative impact on the separated group, but they would also affect the entire organization as a whole because there's a need for harmony. Where do groups and organizations interact? Groups can often be seen in close proximity to each other, whereas organizations, being physically closer to other participants is certainly helpful, but not always necessary. Like, for example, big multinationals and international businesses and franchises, obviously they're not geographically in close proximity to each other, but they can still stay connected with the use of technology. They can hold Zoom meetings every week, keep in contact with everyone in different geographical locations, and stay in contact in that specific way. And they can also stay in contact with sharing the mission or the goal of the business. Careers such as data analysts, accountants, and data entry clerks they don't need to work closely with each other. These are just some examples of some occupations. How is an organization made up? Most organizations have a complex hierarchical structure, which is made up of multiple levels. They come in many sizes, ranging from small teams with just a few members to massive corporations with thousands of employees, said Anderson in 2020. The larger organizations are often composed of many smaller subgroups. If large enough, they may even have sub-organizations of their own. And some examples of some large organizations would be Microsoft, Google, and Apple. These organizations will have thousands of employees with all sorts of complex hierarchical levels. A single business may consist of several departments, such as accounting, marketing, manufacturing, and human resources. Each department will have a hierarchy and divide labor to suit their goals and their vision. How is a group made up? A group has a simple structure when compared to an organization's complex one. It can be formed by members in an organization being linked by relations of interpersonal trust based on similar personal, ethnic, or commercial backgrounds. So to think of it this way, groups are made up of individuals, and they are all linked by a certain short-term goal. Why do organizations or groups exist? What is their reason for existence? Unless you were the core group that established an organization, you may have been under the impression that it was always there, like that building was always there. The key reason that an organization and a group exist is that they want to accomplish a specific purpose, whatever that purpose may be. And this is just a summary of all the points using who, what, where, when, how, and why. Leadership in an organization. Why does an organization need to have a leader? This is simple. The leaders of an organization help these groups work to obtain a specific purpose. That's the underlying reason. Organizations as a complex system. Organizations can be considered a system as well. A system is defined as an environment in which each interaction between members produces an outcome that affects each and subsequent interactions and outcomes, said Tubbs in 1984. In Out of Control, written by Kevin Kelly in 1994, he introduces the 9 laws of God, which he describes as the organizing principles in systems as diverse and as biological evolution and SimCity on page 468. These laws can also apply to organizations as systems. So taking a minute to look at this, the 9 laws of God would be on your left: distribute being, control from the bottom up, cultivating increasing returns, grow by chunking, maximize the fringes, honor your errors, pursue no optima, have multiple goals, seek persistent disequilibrium, and change changes itself. So to put that in organizational context would be simple because we kind of see like a similarity being reached here. Distribute being. The essence of the organization can be found in all members. That's why they say an organization is the people in the organization, not just the business itself, the building itself. Control from the bottom up. It empowers all members at all levels of the organization, which brings back the thought or the decision for all members of an organization to be able to make decisions that will affect the organization. Cultivate increasing returns. Focus on what your organization does well and do it even better. So you should perfect and master everything that you already know how to do well. Grow by chunking. Organizations grow, not one piece at a time, but in bunches. So you can see organizations make massive growth in a very short amount of time. Maximize the fringes. Honor your creative members and their ideas, even if they're really out there. So no matter how out there an idea might be, it's still important to honor everyone's opinions and everyone's ideas. Honor your errors. Throughout the business organization, there will be some errors made. So it is important to be able to identify what those errors are and then find a way to not make those same errors again. You're learning from your errors, you're learning from your mistakes. Pursue no optima. Have multiple goals. There is no one right answer to a solution or one right answer to complex problems. You can only create multiple partial solutions and then choose the one that best suits the situation that you are in. Seek persistent disequilibrium. This equilibrium, or in this case imbalance, will bring some energy in an organization. Think of it in the context of if there's imbalance in an organization, it will bring energy in the employees to try to create one. Be motivated to try to create a certain balance where there is imbalance. And change changes itself. Change leads to more change, which changes the initial change. I hope that makes sense. Organizations are tremendously challenging places in which to participate and lead. They are, however, places of great potential because they offer a large number and variety of talented people to collaborate with to achieve business goals. Organizational structures. Just as all organizations exist for a specific purpose, they also have a structure that makes their day-to-day operations easier. So here we are going to explore three models, and these three models include a classic bureaucratic structure, an inverted organizational structure, and a web structure. These are the three most common. They're not the only three, but they're just the three most common that are used. Classic bureaucratic structure. Max Weber created the classic bureaucratic model for organizations, featuring the hierarchical structure of dividing labor, with clear and articulated rules and regulations to govern how the organization should operate. And now we're going to look at a video which explains this classic bureaucratic structure in more detail.
Max Weber has made lots of contributions to the areas of organizational studies, management, and organizational communication. The main one is his contribution around the concept of bureaucracy. First of all, how do you pronounce his name? I've heard Weber, I've heard Weber. I've looked all over the internet. I've informally surveyed my colleagues in academia, and it's about 50-50. The Weber pronunciation is the Americanized style, the Americanized version of his name, and Weber is the more European pronunciation. I think both are acceptable, and I personally recommend however your teacher says it, that's how you should pronounce it. He was a German sociologist and political economist. We use his concept of bureaucracy in organizational communication and organizational studies, but he actually wrote in quite a lot of different areas and has influenced many areas of academia beyond just the workplace studies. He saw the rise of large organizations bringing together large groups of people to manage, and that's not an easy thing. We're going from farms to factories, from smaller shops to larger organizations, and how are people going to do that? Well, he believed that the existing approaches to organizing that he saw had really obvious problems, especially around the area of authority. He saw that most workplaces use relationships, kinship, or family in other words, or customs to lead and make decisions. This is called traditional authority. And he saw lots of problems with that. The main one was particularism, where employees were hired or fired for a variety of non-organizational reasons, such as their religion, race, sex, and relation or family connections. We call this favoritism. He called it particularism because a particular group of people was having a very disproportionate influence over the organization. So the decision making was isolated in the hands of a few people, and it was very unlikely that they were going to be the most qualified people to run the organization at its best. He saw this as a disadvantage to organizations if they let this happen. And so he favored a more rational approach to running organizations. He wanted them to achieve their goals more rationally, especially through clarified leadership and clarified rules for decision making. In terms of leadership, he wanted what he called the legal rational authority, where the legitimate authority of leadership positions should be formalized and fixed to those positions. So it wasn't about if you had lots of charisma or if you were really persuasive or if you were related to a certain somebody. Your legitimate authority came from the position that you occupied in the structure. In this way, he wanted to be consistent with societal law, where organizations should be run by formal rules and policies. He wanted the organization's rules and policies to parallel the kind of rules that we see in society. And most importantly, he thought the authority should reside in the position or the office. It should not reside with the individual person, their personality. Because let's say you're being supervised by somebody and they move out of that position and a new person moves in, well, the person who's occupying that position should have decision-making power over you and your department. The person who leaves should not still be having that kind of influence from the sidelines over the organization. So he wanted to keep it much more legal and rational. Bureaucracy has numerous parts. The first is division of labor among the participants. So division of labor is where we divide work into small, separate steps. So let's say you want to finalize a semester schedule of courses at college. You would think that you might be able to just walk in, swipe your credit card, take your seat, and now you're enrolled in the course and off you go. But if you've ever been to a college campus, you know there's lots of different steps. This is chopped up into seemingly endless steps. So you have to figure out financial aid from one office. You get advised somewhere else. When you register, that's a separate process. You have to pay through various ways. Then you confirm your course schedule. You get add codes and drop codes from somebody else. And so what should be or what could be very simple is divided into lots of different steps. And there's reasons for this. One of them is so that, let's say you swipe your credit card and let's say the professor runs off with that money. Well, you're protected against that because you pay one department and then you take a course with another department. And so bureaucracy is meant to, again, protect against that disproportionate or lopsided influence. Hierarchy of offices is number 2. You're probably familiar with this, where there's a kind of pyramid structure, and at the bottom of that pyramid are all the employees, and above that you have supervisors, then managers, and finally the big boss. Number 3, a set of general rules that govern performance was a big part of bureaucracy. So there are rules that govern how you perform. The supervisor, the people running things can't just make it up and change it from depending upon their mood and who you are. Let's say you're working at a place and they say productivity is important and you show good productivity. They say your sales numbers are important and you show that. Customer service is important and you show that. Well, those are the general rules that everybody should be evaluated by. They shouldn't mark you high in these things and still fire you. You should be able to get rewarded, promoted, and maybe even get a raise if you uphold the goals and follow the policies. Number 4, a rigid separation of personal life from work life. This guards again against particularism. So let's say a couple gets married, they meet at work, they get married, and one of the people is still being supervised by the other. What happens in many organizations is they will put the person who was being supervised in a different department so that their spouse is not directly supervising them. This guards against favoritism or that particularism. Number 5, the selection of personnel is done on the basis of technical qualifications, and that pursues the equal treatment of all employees. You're getting selected, you're getting promoted because you are the most qualified, not because you're the right or wrong religion or race, the wrong gender, the wrong family relationships, etc. Number 6, participants view employment as a career, and tenure protects against unfair, arbitrary dismissal. Tenure meaning if you've been there for a while and you have what you might call veteran status, you're going to keep your job as long as you continue to do well. They're not going to fire you for some minor or petty personal reason. You're going to basically keep your job. And these are the 6 points under bureaucracy, and we see bureaucracies all over the place. Anytime you hear the word administration, you're generally talking about an organization that has chosen a bureaucratic style, like lots of different branches of government. College campuses, like I mentioned earlier, are really ideal or pure examples of bureaucracies. The military is a classic example. Large companies, even for-profit corporations, often organize in a bureaucratic style, and certainly factories like Volkswagen, or if you're in Europe, Volkswagen, just like we pronounce it Weber in Europe. Factories often choose to be organized in a bureaucratic style of structure. The legacy of Weber's bureaucracy is a little bit mixed. Some people, of course, will still attempt to take advantage, even though Weber wanted to guard against particularism, against favoritism. Some people, of course, can operate in just about any structure and try to find a personal advantage. There's also the concept of red tape. That's a term you often hear associated with bureaucracies, and that's the overemphasis on structure, policies, and procedure that slows or prevents needed action. So if you've ever worked inside a bureaucracy, then you know what I mean. It feels as if just to do anything, you are constrained by the limits of the organization, and you are constrained. That's what it's there for. However, sometimes it's constraining what should be positive action. Weber called this the iron cage, where people were trapped in what he called calculated systems that pursue efficiency and control that threaten individual freedom. So you might feel like you're just stuck in your own little box, in your own little divided area of labor on your rung of the hierarchy, and that's all you can really do is stay there and do the little bit of work that you're given. So the legacy is mixed. Weber saw this as much better than the alternative, like traditional authority and that particularism, and certainly better than a more charismatic style of leadership where it's based upon the person's personality. We look to Max Weber quite often in organizational studies. His work has been cited consistently for decades by tens of thousands of researchers and scholars, and very recently still his work is more cited than ever. A very influential figure, a foundational researcher and author in the area of organizational studies, and that's why we study Max Weber's concept of bureaucracy.
Okay, so taking in what we just saw in the video, is there anything new that you all might have learned that you probably didn't know before? Anyone? Okay, so moving on.
I'll say that you covered, even though your boss did something behind your back like that.
Okay, thank you. I didn't see who it was. Okay, so the classic bureaucratic structure is displayed here for a particular student organization. Okay, the reason why they're... Okay, I'm just reading something in the chat. Okay, thank you, Annie. Okay. So here we have the classic bureaucratic structure for a student organization. As we see, the president is at the top. Then we have officers and committee chairs in the middle. And then we have participants and members at the bottom. So taking this into consideration in a normal organization, we would have at the top, we have the board of directors at the top and the CEO. And then in the middle, we'd have managers, financial managers, marketing managers in the middle. And then third, we'd have normal employees. Okay, so there is now a call for organizations to be collaborative, said Berry in 2004, compassionate, said Hill and Stevens in 2003, and empathetic, said Lay and Greer in 2003. Rather than the old command and control functions, leadership within these structures is being asked to connect people across the entire environment by involving the wants, needs, and talents of the organization's membership, said Allen and Sherry in 2000. Okay, so we covered the classic bureaucratic structure. We're going to move on to the inverted organizational structure, the second. There is a new way of creating the organizational structure. It is now a new proposal that the traditional pyramid be flipped upside down so that the members are at the top and the president is at the bottom. So why do you all think that is? Why is there a need for this flip so that the president is at the bottom? Well, okay, the answer was given away. This concept means that the work of the president is to support the efforts of the other officers and committee chairs so they can better meet the needs and wishes of the members. So that's the reason. This can be a powerful exercise for any organization. So now we're just going to take the exact same pyramid from the classic bureaucratic structure and going to turn it upside down. So here it is. Participants and members are at the top. Then we have the officers and committee chairs in the middle, and the president is right at the bottom. Okay, so the third one, the web structure. Another organizational structure that has been proposed is the concept of a web, said Allen in 1990 and Helgeson in 1990 and 1995. The web is defined both by its pattern, similar to that of a spider's web, and by the idea that the shape and pattern of the web will vary over time. This is called the series process, said Helgeson in 1995. New members can easily connect to the structure at its outer edges, where the web is looser and more permeable, said Helgeson in 1995. This structure works well in an environment filled with change, as the pattern is continually being built up, stretched, altered, modified, and transformed, said Helgeson in 1995 on page 20. So here we have the web structure. As you can see, so on the outer part, you would see that new members can easily be added because it's more loose, and this will be in organizations where there is more change. So you're bringing in new employees, they can fit at the edge. And then you'd see going more into the middle, you'd see that there are people who are joined with the common purpose. So the common purpose is at the middle, and then all attachments will be attached to that common purpose. That's the whole structure of the web. The web is a bit complex because there's so many attachments and adjustments and taking out and putting in. Okay, so now we're going to go to the next part of the lecture.
So now we're going to look at the organization mission and core values. So the role of the organization can be multidimensional, whose main aim is to represent the views of its members. It entices persons to want to be a part of the organization. So you have large companies such as BP, NP, Petrotrin when they will open Unitrust. You have persons who want to be a part of that organization. Most organizations have a mission and a vision statement, which aims to bring the ideas to life. So, the mission and vision statements are fundamental for the success of any organization. So, the mission and vision statements looks at the future of the business, where the business is going, strategies and decisions that you would need to make in order to reach the goals, actions and behaviors of the workers in order for them to achieve the goal. So also note that an organization mission and vision statement should be able to answer the key question as to why does the organization exist? Jones and Cannon 1995 states that once a mission statement is written, it should be shared with as much persons as possible and should reflect the organization's personality. So I'm not sure if you all ever had the opportunity to walk into the ministry or um, RHAs. You would see boldly displayed the mission and vision statements so that anyone can see it as they walk in. So the mission and vision statement should be motivational. We want it to be able to motivate the persons who are already a part of the organization. So the mission of the organization can be social, it can be service related to what they would serve to their patients or whether it be their clients. It can be programmatic, it can be political, or it can be a combination of all mentioned. So now we're going to look at what a mission and vision statement look like, and this was taken from the Chamber of Commerce. So the mission that they have is to be the champion of business towards the development of a strong and sustainable national economy. And their vision statement was, "We are the voice of the business." So we're going to look at now leadership roles. So the most important job of the leader is to manage the culture within the organization. So Deal and Kennedy frameworks in 1982 closely examined this, the organizational culture, using a different framework. So it looked at values and it talked about the guiding principles for each member's behavior. It looked like heroes. So you'd have persons who you have other workers looking up to. So they are ordinary members whose actions provide role model to others. Their rights and rituals, they provide formal or sometimes informal guidelines that govern their everyday life, such as communication. How do they communicate within this organization? Is it through Google Docs? Is it through emails? How do they socialize? Do they have set things like for Christmas parties or other events? How do they work and play? Do they set aside time to have work lime or a cricket or so forth? So it's recognition for positive actions and how it should be rewarded. Are they going to award employees who achieve certain goals for the organization? So now we're just going to have a 3-minute video on mission and vision statement.
Imagine a CEO shares with you that there is constantly discussion amongst management and employees on what directions the company should take and asks you for help. You may quickly find out that there is a lack of clear and common vision, mission, and values. In this module, we will discuss each of these concepts, how they relate to each other, and share some practical examples for better understanding. So, let's dive into it. We'll start with the first element, which is vision. A formulated vision provides a concrete way for stakeholders, especially employees, to understand the meaning and purpose of your business. It describes the desired long-term results of your company's efforts. For example, an early Microsoft vision statement was a computer on every desk and in every home. A company vision statement reveals at the highest levels what an organization most hopes to be and achieve in the long term. Having a vision in business will help you to align everyone to head in the right direction and give a purpose to what they do. So, how can one define their company's vision? Well, many companies have their teams brainstorm to come up with a vision statement that summarizes the company's vision in a brief and concise way. Brevity is key here. After all, your task is to write a vision statement, not a vision paragraph. Here are some examples of well-written vision statements from successful organizations. Amazon. Our vision is to be Earth's most customer-centric company. where customers can find and discover anything they might want to buy online. LinkedIn. Create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce. Great. Now that we've discussed what vision is, let's move on to the next element, mission. While vision is about using your imagination and foreseeing your company's future, the mission is about rolling up your sleeves and putting in the work. It's necessary to understand the difference between vision and mission. The vision statement describes where you want to take your company, whereas the mission statement describes what needs to be done to turn that vision into a reality. And just like the vision statement, a mission statement needs to be short and to the point. A moment ago, we discussed the vision statements of Amazon and LinkedIn. Now, let's discuss the mission statements of both of them. Amazon. Our mission is to continually raise the bar of the customer experience by using the internet and technology to help consumers find, discover, and buy anything, and empower businesses and content creators to maximize their success. LinkedIn. Connect the world's professionals to make them more productive and successful. Now, let's compare LinkedIn's mission statement with its vision statement that was mentioned before. If you can recall, LinkedIn's vision is to create opportunities for professionals around the world. And what does it need to achieve this vision? Well, as stated in the mission statement, LinkedIn plans to accomplish this by connecting professionals with each other. Great. Now that we've discussed vision and mission, it's time to discuss the last element, which is values.
So let me ask the class, has anyone ever been exposed to a mission vision statement? Has anyone had the opportunity to see it displayed in a workplace or a business place that they went into? So no one saw a mission and
Yeah,
vision
yeah,
statement?
I've seen it before, Mona.
Okay. So was it similar to what was discussed?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mishka. So moving
Yeah.
along, we're going to look at leadership roles. So the rights and rituals have been known to govern how the organization operates. It defines how meetings are conducted, whether it is monthly, weekly, quarterly, the internal communication network within the organization, how do they communicate with each other, examines how information is gathered and disseminated within the organization. Is it via email? Who needs to know this information? Dylan Kennedy noted that this whole process is dependent on the people and not the people. So we continue within the roles within the organization. With any organization structure, persons assume different roles. Those roles often are not defined or assigned. Sometimes persons assumed based on their personality. So you have a number of persons within the organization. You would have somebody being the priest, who is someone who guards values and maintain the union within the organization. You have the whispers, usually behind the scenes, who are close to leadership, who always whispering something. You have the gossips, who usually supply information that can be unreliable based on hearsay, not actual facts. Administrative support. So you have persons, employees having access to accurate information. And this is sometimes by human resources. Example, you have the spies, whose loyalty lies with the leader and provides them with the inside information. So sometimes little things that happen within the organization, it end up going to the boss because the spies carry that information along. You have the cabal, just like the name says, confusion. They are usually self-serving individuals. They form a secret alliance and are driven by self-advancement. So Bowman and Deal in 2003 B looks at four frames within the organization. We have the structural organizational charts, roles, job descriptions. We have human resources, which looks at the people within the organization. Political, who form coalitions based on scarcity mindset. And they have the symbolic, which are ceremonies, stories, and heroes, as we mentioned before. So this is just a diagram which depicts what I spoke about before. You have your structural, which looks at goals, policy, technology, environment, social, architecture, attune, structured to task, technology, and environment. You have your human resources, the skills, relationship, empowerment, align organizational and human needs. You have your symbolic, which is culture, ritual, ceremony, stories, heroes. We mentioned that before. You have your political, which is power, conflict, competition, organizational policies, and advocacy. So understanding the roles within the organization. So Gert and Horsby 2003 studies of society around the world found that people differ in 5 broad dimensions. So there is the power of distance index, which looks at equality and inequality, which society supports to a degree. Then you have the individualism, how an individual work is emphasized by collective action. You have masculinity, where traditional male values are embraced over the female values. You have the uncertainty avoidance index, where ambiguity and uncertainty are tolerated. You have long-term orientation, and a long-term perspective is favored over a short. So now we just have a brief video on organizations.
In the first video, I made the statement that the single biggest opportunity that we all have to raise the performance of our organizations is our culture. But what exactly is culture? I mean, it seems like such an obvious question, and yet it could be pretty squishy and hard to define. And if we can't pin down exactly what it is, it's going to be pretty hard to leverage it in a way that can transform our organizations. My goal for this video is to bring a lot more clarity to that question. Let me offer you a simple definition of culture that I use in the second edition of my book, Culture by Design. I say that culture is the set of principles that governs how people behave in a given context. Let me say that one more time. Culture is the set of principles that governs how people behave in a given context. So let's unpack that a little bit. There are 2 parts to this definition. The first and the most important is the idea that culture is about behavior. While our behavior is certainly influenced by our values and our beliefs, the culture is revealed through behavior. I may or may not know what people's values and beliefs are, but I can see what they do or how they behave. And at the end of the day, that's all that really matters. By the way, if you've defined a set of core values, you may be wondering, well, what's the difference between that and a behavior? In another video, I'm going to answer that question in a lot of depth. But let me just say here that a value is typically an abstract concept, whereas a behavior is an action. And because it's an action, it's usually much clearer to teach and a lot easier to understand. The second part of this definition is the notion that context matters. Recently, I was listening to Malcolm Gladwell's classic book, The Tipping Point. And he's got this whole section in there on the power of context. And he cites study after study after study that shows how people behave differently in different situations. That's not to suggest that people aren't authentic, but rather that the situation we're in and the group of people we're around significantly influences how we behave. What's considered permissible or expected behavior is different when you're at work or with your family or with your high school friends or your softball team or a church. Each of these groups has a different culture or a different set of norms for behavior. As you're going to see in the next video, seeing culture through a behavioral lens and understanding that our behavior is heavily influenced by our environment is core to appreciating just how strongly our culture influences the performance of our people, and with it, the results that we achieve as an organization. Be sure to check that video out.
So now we're going to continue with an application of Hosford dimensions. People who have different beliefs and preferences, this can cause a misalignment between the culture of the organization and the belief of the new members. It also looks at the importance of understanding organizational culture, especially for leaders. It looks at differences in perspectives that can occur between veteran and new members. So, embracing the change within the organizational culture looks at culture within the organization provides valuable insight into how it operates. Veteran members may be comfortable with the current structure and may not want things to be changed. So, the approach may be contrasted. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, versus a new members whose mindset will be different and they will be like, don't worry about it, we can improve. New members may be readily open to change. So I want to ask the class, has anyone ever had that um, experience whereby going into a new organization, faced with veteran workers who don't want things changed, they being the newbie? Has anyone ever had that experience before? Yes, no?
No.
No? All right. So I will share my experience since no one had it. I remember having one of my first jobs, very excited to go and to do my best. Walked into an organization where the culture was very tight and very rigid, where I tried to do something different. And I remember a veteran worker telling me, listen, don't come and change the way we do things, continue doing things the way it's supposed to, or well, they want it done. So in that, it demonstrated that the culture, the way it was, they wanted it to stick that way. So moving along, we're looking at organizational culture. We look at amplified behaviors of the leaders embedded in the network of organizational practices, shared beliefs, values, assumptions held by the members of an organization, visible in the way that it works, get it done on a day-to-day basis, and it's evident in the behaviors of the individuals and the groups. So the impact of organizational culture, we talked about some of it before. Organizational culture can negatively impact the life within the organization. So Stacy in 1992 stated that strongly shared cultures block new learning, because if you're accustomed doing things one way, you're not open to do something new, which could be better and which could make the organization uh, much better in the future. In other words, the more norms that are strongly shared, the more resistance in changing them. Attempting to change the vision and mission without changing the culture can lead to resistance within the organization. They must go hand in hand. So, the importance of networks can be recognized by BUSI in 2002 and Watts in 2003. It was identified by playing the game of degrees of separation of Kevin Bacon. Basically, what that means is that there was this theory, what they call the Kevin Bacon theory, where it rests on the assumption that any person involved in Hollywood film industry can be linked through their film roles to Kevin Bacon with 6 steps. So it's also linked to this movie, 6 Degrees of Separation, where it talked about which concept is. It looks at any two people on earth are 6 or fewer acquaintance through links apart. So what it's basically saying is that networks are very important for collaboration and transformation within any organization. Networks cannot be seen as collaborative groups with a common purpose. And the purpose of networks, it can deal with advocacy issues, diversity programs, and also event planning. So formation and management of networks, there are key considerations when forming a network according to Lipnack and Stamps. There must be an agreement, purpose. I'm just getting feedback from somebody, sorry. Just check your mic, please. Creating links amongst its members and multiple leadership roles must exist within the network. So adaptation of the organization life cycle, the success of any organization depends on its ability to adapt to changing conditions, change in membership. Sometimes people retire, people leave. Um, Unfortunately, some members may die, change in leadership. Same concept, persons might lead, we might have a new leader. The ability to quickly adapt allows the organization the ability to renew itself and maintain its vibrancy. Often, the ability to identify, recruit, prepare, and mentor future leaders is often overlooked and can often lead to failure to sustain the organization in the future. So we're going to look at briefly what they call the lives of the organization. So Lives of an Organization was adopted by John W. Garner in 1990 and Ishak Adiz in 1988. They classed organization into two stages. It looks at infancy to describe the organization in its very early stages. It looks at the maturity stage, where those organizations that evolve into something more. At each stage, something is gained and something is lost. When organizations are young, they are known to be a little more flexible and motivated and willing to take risks. As organizations mature, that flexibility is sometimes non existent. So, this is just a brief diagram showing the organizational life cycle, what I talked about growth, infancy, and some this even went a little further. It looked at the curve, the tip of the curve, you see in prime, and then there's the aging of the organization. If um, practices are not implemented, then you can also have what they call the dying stage, where the organization can die. So, implications of student leaders. It is important to understand that the organization life cycle for student leaders. Students must be encouraged to evaluate the current stage and accomplishments of their organization, must seek advice in re-examining activities within the organization, ensuring that they align with the mission, vision, and purpose. I'll now pass you on to my colleague.
All right, now we go on to multicultural organizational development. So, for an organization to remain vibrant and viable, the organization must be willing to remake itself. One way of doing this is by multicultural organizational development. So, what is multicultural organizational development? Well, it is a process which emphasizes the full participation and commitment of members from all cultural and social groups to end all forms of social oppression which may affect the meaningful and inclusive involvement of members within an organization. So, some examples of social oppression, the most common ones are racism, ableism, ageism, sexism, and heterosexism. For the ones who don't know what any of those are, racism, it is the discrimination against an individual because of their race or ethnic group. Ableism is the discrimination of disabled individuals. Ageism is the discrimination of people because of their age. Sexism is the discrimination of someone because of their gender. It can affect either male or female, but it mostly occurs to women. And heterosexism is discrimination against gay individuals. and all of these occur within an organization. So, what do you think the impact of ending all forms of social oppression would be? Would organizations become a better place for everyone? Well, this emphasis on diversity and social justice offers a fresh perspective on how to approach organizational transformation. Amor and Hales, Jackson and Holvino, and Pope have all contributed to the discourse of racism in higher education. Amor and Hales' research shed light on the complexities of racial dynamics within educational institutions. Jackson and Holvino explored racism from a critical perspective that examined how it manifests within higher education organizations. Pope, her contributions focused on strategies for promoting multiculturalism and combating racism in educational settings. Amon Hales and Jackson and Holvino's contribution, they offered similar models for multicultural organizational development. Their model showed how organizations move from a monocultural and exclusionary perspective to one that is compliant and non-discriminatory through a redefinition process and then to a multicultural perspective. Jackson and Holvino's work is particularly important as it elaborates on the assumption that change agents make, whether they come from monocultural, non-discriminatory, or multicultural perspective. So this is a list of change agents made that Jackson and Holvino's work elaborated on, whether they come from monocultural, non-discriminatory, or a multicultural perspective. So here we see that the nature of society in a monocultural organization is viewed as harmonious. Everyone has similar interests and is content with the way things are. But in a multicultural organization, their organizations are filled with conflict. Everyone has different interests and it seems chaotic. This organization is in need of radical change. Learning organizations. This label is used to describe organizations that have the capacity to grow, change, and develop to adapt to the challenges of a constantly changing environment. Peter Sinch and Watkins and Masick propose a way to conceptualize organizations to help them operate successfully. They included models of personal mastery, mental models, shared visions, and team learning, all of which is linked together to make up a framework of systems thinking that create a learning organization. So now I would explain what each is. Personal mastery involves individuals doing their best job possible. Everyone within an organization has different skills and abilities that can be contributed. Everyone has their strengths, and when members are skilled, they empower the organization and the organization benefits. It is also important for leaders to work with members so they can learn from them and acquire skills that can help them be more effective in their current roles and future roles within the organization. Mental models are the assumptions that people make about various aspects of the world. Mental models are difficult to understand and is sometimes difficult to change. But for any positive change to occur, these mental models must change. Mental models could be good or bad. It all relies on what organizations are about, like their concepts on inclusion, empowerment, ethics, or their common purpose or goals. These images help to guide an organization into being strong and successful. Shared vision focuses on the idea that the mission, vision, and purpose of an organization must be shared by all members. Shared vision is important as it can empower members and their personal mastery level. Shared vision is important as it helps keep an organization together. It helps empower members and their personal mastery level to do their best. Without a shared vision, an organization can fall apart, as everyone will be working haphazardly towards different goals or no goal at all. And this can lead to the loss of motivation, and that can affect an organization's productivity level. Team learning is a collaborative process where people work together to achieve a common goal. For true learning to occur, individual learning must be supplemented by learning at the team, organizational, and societal level. This includes things like learning how to communicate, how to make decisions, standing up for what you think is right or what you disagree with. Leaders are also a big part of this as they must be constantly engaged with members to guide them. A systems approach governs the thinking in a learning organization. So when people think systematically, they share responsibility for good and bad that are happening. They do not look for someone else to blame, but look at what they have done to contribute to the problem. We now go on to virtuality and the impact of technology. So Charles Handy defined virtual organizations as organizations that do not need to have all people or sometimes any of the people in one place in order to deliver their service. The organization exists, but you can't see it. It is a network, not an office. Ziggers notes that we should think in terms of virtuality as a continuum. The more the team is separated in terms of geography, time, or culture, an organization is more virtual. So you do not need to be in a physical place altogether to be considered an organization. An organization could be virtual according to Ziggers, and organizations do not need to be in one place. It could be spread apart many countries, regardless of the geography, the time difference, cultures, even the language. So, what are virtual organizations like? In virtual organizations, trust is extremely important but very difficult to develop as we do not see each other face to face. The organization is built on the need for members to believe and trust each other and involve members at all levels in decision-making process. There must also be common purpose and values shared among the organizations so that they can work effectively. Avolio Kahai explains that leadership within virtual environments to be the development of relationships, either connected via information technology or not. Leaders still have to build a relationship in order to lead effectively. Zaccaro and Bada noted a number of team leader roles that lead to e-team effectiveness. This includes enhancing cohesion, nurturing trust, promoting sharing of information and ideas, moderating team conflict, facilitating team coordination and integration, and developing social and human capital. So, what are the impacts of all of these technologies? Well, we are now able to communicate and share information with anyone, anytime, anywhere. We now go on to new paradigm in leadership in conventional paradigm cultures. A leadership paradigm is a set of assumptions, beliefs, values, and practices that define how leadership is perceived and practiced in each context. It is a framework that shapes the way leaders think about their roles, their relationships with others, and their approach to leading people and organizations. It may be challenging to embrace the principles of new paradigm leadership, but you must take action into continuing to use this information. So, to do so, you must share what you know with other leaders, members, or advisors. By sharing what you know, you'll learn the information better, and you may also find someone who is interested in what you have to say, and you can continue to connect. We should accept personal responsibility for finding ways to use this information rather than making excuses. By maintaining a positive outlook and trying to find areas in which you can use this information, it will be beneficial to you and your organization. And that concludes our presentation for today.
All right, if there are no questions, I'll um, stop the recording.